Hey there, guys. It's Joe again with some more coronavirus updates. If you watched my last one, it seems like a lot of you enjoyed it. It helped a lot of clear up a lot of inconsistencies out there. And if you found this helpful, I'm doing this for both of you and for me. So I'll keep trying to do this. Wanted to get this out before I have the next stint of a couple shifts that I have and might not have time. So just getting into this, I wanted to clear up some questions and just share some updates. So the first question I got from a lot of people were symptoms and what to look out for, as a lot of people right now are asymptomatic, and that's great. The first couple symptoms that people can have are fever, dry cough, shortness of breath, fatigue, and body aches or myalgias. Again, these are all very vague symptoms. Most viral upper respiratory colds, infections, flu have all these symptoms, which makes this extremely difficult to distinguish them from one another. And most people get these symptoms 4 to 7 days after exposure or after transmission, but this is a big spectrum as well. People can have these symptoms as early as 2 days after exposure. Some people can have them as late as 20 to 24 days. Those are obviously outliers. It's my automatic cat feeder. These are obviously outliers, but these, again, it still can happen. Now, the problem is that we are not done finding out symptoms of COVID-19. There are some new reports of GI symptoms coming out and about as prevailing symptoms. This is diarrhea, stomach upset, nausea, and vomiting. And there have been novel reports as well of people having something called anosmia and ageusia. These are very weird names for things that mean lack of smell and lack of taste. Again, these are not an overwhelmingly amount of high cases, but these are something that have already perked our ears and symptoms that we look out for nowadays. But there, again, has not been one reliable symptom, unfortunately, that tells us this person has COVID-19. And that's what makes this so difficult for us to triage and for us to treat and try to diagnose. Now, the vast majority obviously have mild symptoms, around 80%. Early estimates show that 14% of these people, or 14% with COVID-19 will probably need hospitalization, and 5% will probably need the ICU level of care. Now, when we're talking about mortality, the jury's still kind of out. We're judging a lot of this based on early Chinese numbers, but it was touted as 1.8% early on. If we are taking the confirmed cases nowadays divided by the mortality now divided by the total number of cases in the United States, it shows a mortality rate of 1.5%. Again, this is probably skewed by underreporting, but take it as you will. Now, what this does not demonstrate effectively to people is the big dichotomy in mortality rate between the young and the old. Between the ages of 10 and 40 years old, the mortality rate's only about 0.2%. This mortality is only 2 times the level of the common flu, which, again, I mean, it's pretty high for the common flu. But when we're talking about those between the ages of 70 and 80 years old, we're talking about a mortality rate of 8%. And finally, those over the age of 80, we're talking about a mortality rate of 14.8%. That is astronomically high. That is something that is one of the driving factors why we're taking this so seriously. Imagine this ravaging through a nursing home, and the results would be devastating. So that's why we're taking this so seriously. Unfortunately, in the past couple of days, we've seen big spikes in positive cases in 20 to 40-year-olds, probably because, one, there's all those spring breakers who went to Florida who said YOLO and we're going out, we're not getting quarantined, and those who are also just not taking the quarantine seriously. And these are the people who are going to spread it to those who are most at risk of dying from this illness, and this is why we need to take quarantine seriously. Speaking of quarantine, people have asked, what should I do? If you're having these symptoms, but you don't feel terrible, you don't feel extremely short of breath, you don't feel extremely lightheaded from dehydration, or you can't keep food down, or you don't feel like you're on your deathbed, stay home. Self-quarantine and isolate for 14 days. There are some new guidelines suggesting that you're probably okay if you've been fever-free for 3 days without the use of any antipyretics or fever-reducing agents like Tylenol and ibuprofen, like we've talked about before, and as long as it's 8 days after onset of your first symptom. But that being said, if you are presumed positive, or if you're tested negative but have all the symptoms, or if you've been exposed to people who have been who are positive for the virus, you should do your best to stay at home. Use one bathroom by yourself. Try to isolate yourself from other people who are living around you, and try to stay in one room for the majority of all these days that we were saying that you should stay home. Now, we are realistic. We know that this is practically impossible, but do your best. If you can wear a mask at home, you're doing it for the people around you. You are no longer doing it for yourself. If you can't find a mask, use a scarf and a bandana, just like we talked about before. I mean, eventually, healthcare workers are going to have to do it. you should be able to do it too at home. Now, just talking about updates, we're going to go through this quickly. Cases today. Today is March 26th. It has been 2 days since my since my first vlog practically. We had 46,805 cases 2 days ago. We are up to 69,246 at the time of this recording. When talking about where these are all highlighted, New York is the epicenter of the United States. In New York alone, we have 37,258 cases, and of that, 20,000 of them are in New York City. So that means practically 1 out of every 3.5 cases are in New York City, and that's devastating. In the past 24 hours, things have just gotten worse. There have been 100 fatalities just in the past 24 hours, 385 deaths overall in the state, but 100 of them happened in New York. 100 of them happened in the last 24 hours. Again, pretty terrible news. The governor in the state there is looking to open at least one 1,000-bed overflow hospital or field hospital in each of the 5 boroughs of New York City and some in other counties. When talking about Philadelphia, as I know most of you are Philadelphians that I'm kind of putting this out to, there have been 342 cases in Philadelphia, 93 in the last day. So practically, again, 1 out of every 3 happened in the last day. There's been 1 total death. I believe it was 2 days ago, and it was a man in his 50s. No other reported deaths so far. Something alarming is that 37 out of 342 cases overall in Philadelphia, 11% of them, those are in healthcare workers. So 37 out of 342 are healthcare workers. This is why we're taking it very seriously and testing healthcare workers to try to make sure that we are not having positive people treat people in attempts to kind of, again, flatten the curve and limit exposure. Now, PPE, I talked about this on the last one. Levels are still low. They're not critically low right now, but we know that the onslaught of this virus is going to happen in the next few weeks, and that's what we're trying to prepare for. FEMA is here. They did have a shipment to local hospitals, but again, these weren't that large volumes of PPE that we need, and we are still asking for donations. Now, Hahnemann Hospital, this was closed down late last year, and it is empty. Nothing's in it. They were in talks with the owner to try to see if we could use that as a field hospital. Now, the owner was reportedly open to selling the hospital outright to the local government for an exorbitant price. That was not going to happen. There were talks of a 1-year lease and then a 6-month lease at the cost of $1 million per month. And then recently he brought that down to an offer of $400,000 a month by the owner. As far as I know, there are no talks in terms of signing that deal. They think that's still an exorbitant amount to pay for. And if it does become something that is likely to be needed in the future, it's probably going to need large repairs before it gets up to speed to stay on track with the coronavirus epidemic. If anything, it would probably be used as an isolation or a quarantine place or a triage site for people who think that they have it before overloading our hospitals. Talking about ventilators, what a ventilator is these are breathing machines that help people sustain life support. They do the breaths for you practically, and this is after we intubate people. We only have anywhere from 60 to 100,000 ventilators in the United States. These numbers range anywhere. I can't find a good resource with exact numbers, but with an extra possibly 20 to 50,000 vents or breathing machines that can be used in a pinch for full ventilators. There's a stockpile of apparently 16,000 ventilators that the United States government has stockpiled for possible biological threats and warfare. But again, this is probably nowhere near the amount of ventilators we're going to need. And if it comes to that point where we are fully using every single ventilator in the United States, it's going to become another Italy where we have to unfortunately start deciding who gets on life support and who doesn't. And that is the big drive to us trying to find more ventilators, to source them, and figure out how we're going to circumvent that problem. Now, in feel-good news, I'm going to end with this, as I will try always to. There have been huge amounts of people volunteering, and a lot more organized groups have come out of the woodwork to try to help. There's a new group called the Philly Mask Brigade. Shout out to them. It's a volunteer-run group that they help to take donations for masks and distribute them along local hospitals. There is a huge group on Facebook. Shout out to these guys, the Philadelphia Organization of Health Profession Students, the COVID response team. There's a Facebook group of well over 1,000 medical, nursing, podiatry, dental, PA and PT students who are out there currently in school, who are dedicated to helping find ways to volunteer, to help those on the front lines, to help the healthcare system as they're going to be there in the future, by donating masks, making masks, finding ways to bring food to the hospitals, huge group. Kudos to them, and thank you guys for everything you're doing. The Philadelphia Medical Reserve Corps, this has shown to be huge and vital. There have been 900 people in Philadelphia who have so far volunteered. You don't have to have any medical experience to sign up, and I highly suggest those who have the time, who are willing to do so, sign up and help. These are people who are helping at testing sites and to help with the government response. Again, no medical training is necessary for that. I'm still getting donations personally for N95 masks from friends and family. Shout out to my cousin Mark and Miyako. This is a girl who's a student at my alma mater, PCOM. They personally donated boxes of N95 masks to me, who I will then distribute to the hospitals that need them. I really appreciate it. And again, I don't think we can speak about how much these are in need. And finally, shout out to a friend of mine, Ryan. He's a DJ friend of mine. He started something called Fuel for the Frontline. He's been taking donations to buy food trays to support local restaurants and bring them to local ERs. I'll put a link in the description. Super helpful. Everything else, all your efforts have not gone unnoticed. A million people that I could thank right now for everything you're doing. And if this goes outside of Philadelphia, thank you to everyone else who's helping everyone in New York and all the other cities. There was a video I'll put up of people in Atlanta cheering for healthcare workers, etc. So people still have been awesome during this time of quarantine, during this time of self-isolation, and still people are still helping others. So during this time, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Hopefully, it's going to get worse before it gets better. But let's continue to stay positive, and let's keep doing what we can do to help out each other. So this was not shorter than the last one, unfortunately, but I'll keep doing my best. There's just a lot of updates early on, and we'll try to keep everyone as updated as possible. Again, any more questions, let me know. Write them down in the comments. I'll get to them in the next one. But until then, thank you guys for everything. Stay safe.